When I was a little boy, I was extremely busy throwing slugs at other kids in my Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer lobbies. You know, like any other kid at the time would. Staying up to date with Call of Duty games was the most important thing in my life as a teenager. Right after discovering what is inside my pants. So naturally, I was very hyped to play Black Ops when it came out. And I loved Black Ops 1. But despite putting yet another couple of 100 hours into its multiplayer mode, I was now also playing a new mode, Zombies. And I played Kino Der Toten so much. And 5 too sometimes. Now was I good? No. I thought the map was named 5 because it would track my highest round on it. The map is just too hard, I don't know what to say. However, I never really played Zombies after that. Just didn't care for it. I didn't really care about Call of Duty much after Modern Warfare 3 anyway. But got to almost 6 months ago, which, yes, that's how long this video has been in the making, when I sporadically, for no reason whatsoever, decided to buy Black Ops 1, 2, 3, 4 and Cold War, plus all the DLC, for no other reason than the zombie mode. Hello. I usually don't do facecam type stuff for these type of videos, but this is a very long video and I need to say a couple of things before we start this video, so I decided to do it in my little, stream setup, whatever, not important. Before this video starts, I have to mention that I have more to say than I initially thought, which means that I'll be cutting this video in 2 parts, instead of just one big giant video. I had already edited most of it though, so the entire context of this video will be as if I still thought that it would be one video, but it's cut up. So, because this video will only have World of War maps, Black Ops 1 maps and Black Ops 2 maps. And then the next video will have Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4 and Cold War. You might be wondering where Vanguard is in all of this. I hadn't played Vanguard yet. I have played it now, but I don't know, maybe it's for another time. For now though, let's just head into the video. Any knowledge about the maps, no knowledge about the story, no knowledge about the general consensus on anything, didn't even know if I would like it in the first place. But here I am now, all this time later, presenting to you my ranking of every single Call of Duty Zombies map.
To have been chosen.
Anyone interested in front row seats to their own death? I know who you are.
We start our little adventure in Nacht. But before I get into it, I would like to make it very clear that I have absolutely zero idea what anyone's opinion is. I'm sure there is a zombies community out there that after all this time got a general grasp on what people consider good or bad, but I specifically do not fucking care. Or I don't even want to know about it. These are my opinions formed by a player with zero knowledge, zero nostalgia, and zero bitches. Not that that has anything to do with it. Hopefully, this video can act as a breath of fresh air or a different angle of opinion that is unique to someone who hasn't been with the series from beginning to end. Now on to Nacht. Let me start by asking you a question. How would you define an icon? So look at the Mona Lisa for example. An iconic painting for sure, but why? Because it's a pretty painting maybe? Well, I surely don't know because I have no idea how hard it is to paint. I think the gaming genre actually makes it a lot easier for us. See, we usually define an icon by either something that was extremely popular in the past, or something that was the start of something better. See, we don't just see Mario 64 as an icon because it was popular, we see it as an icon because it laid the foundation for 3D gaming as a whole. However, I'm not here to judge how popular or iconic any of these maps are. I'm here to tell you the quality of them. And so, while I respect Nacht Der Untoten for starting it all, I cannot respect its quality. Nacht does not impress me in any meaningful way. I understand that before Nacht there was nothing, and starting something is always harder than improving it. But Nacht plays it incredibly safe. If I were to ask you to come up with a zombies game within 10 seconds, Nacht would probably be it. You're in a dark bunker while zombies try to come inside. That's basically it. The only real innovation we get is in the form of the mystery box and the wall buys. These bring a little bit of variation to each game, which it desperately needs. I think especially the mystery box was a great idea, as the randomness can often lead to replayability, but I truly believed Nacht Der Untoten shot itself in the foot by having a younger brother named Verrückt that just does everything way, way better. Which means, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to put Nacht in the lackluster tier. Verrückt is the second map to come out, and boy, what a difference. I really enjoyed playing on Verrückt. See, the beauty of a world where Pack-a-Punch wasn't invented yet is the fact that games become difficult really fast. And combine that with Verrückt's tight corridors and suddenly you've created a map with a strong identity for difficulty. Now, we'll see a lot more maps that are difficult, but Verrückt is unique because of the lack of Pack-a-Punch. And uniqueness is important to me. And that's way harder to pull off in World of War times because the limitations they had to work with. Now, you could say Nacht being the first map ever on its own is its way of being unique. But like, really? Is Kino a unique map because it's number 5 then? I think it's more interesting to look at what's inside of these maps. Speaking of which, I also haven't even mentioned power yet. The map introduced a power system, and the way they did it was extremely clever. See, I just talked about replayability being added in the form of the randomness box. Well, Verrückt found its own little alleyway by adding perks. Perks are gonna be a big point of controversy in this video, I can already tell, but for now, I think perks were genius in Verrückt. Makes the game a lot more interesting because you now have way more ways to spend your points to survive for longer. Also, across the walls of Verrückt are messages telling you to turn on the power to unite you and another player, which at the time must have been such a cool reveal. I can already imagine players going, huh? What's that power? And then at the other end of the map, they being reunited with their friends after turning it on. Must have been such a memorable experience. It was a great way to introduce a new concept and I like everything about it. Also, the perk jingles are great. I especially love Deadshot Daiquiri, but for the point of this timeline, that perk doesn't exist yet. We'll get there soon though. Traps are a new addition to the map. Personally, I never really used traps all that much in any of the maps, but I can highlight that they are very important for high rounds on this map. I like that the map who introduced them also implements them so well. Also, the box can teleport now, which I imagine was a way to incentivize players to play on other areas of the map, which is neat, I suppose, but this does start to highlight an issue. See, I think players started to realize that the best way to play this game is by running around in the biggest spot on the map until they die, which on one end doesn't seem like a bad thing at first, but you can't develop a map that way. See, if players never leave that position, then all you really need to do is to create a big circle surrounded by perk machines and a Pack-a-Punch machine. And I can guarantee you a map like that will get boring extremely quickly. So Treyarch was actually given the task to actually counter the playstyle that players like most. Purposefully choosing not to give players what they're looking for and somehow making sure they like it too. There are 2 ways you can go about that problem, and we see Treyarch try both throughout this series. One is to punish the player for staying in a single area. Best example I can give you for this is in Krovi, where a dragon will breathe fire over certain areas every so often. This way you can't stay there forever, well, unless you want to get burnt to a crisp. The second is by rewarding players to leave the area themselves. This is the way Verrückt tries to solve this issue. By scattering perk machines all over the map and by making the mystery box travel to different spots, they made sure that players would have to walk all over the map to get what they want. It's clever, but it doesn't fully solve the problem. Because now players will spend 10 or so waves setting up their perks and weapons before eventually falling back to that one area that's most ideal to train zombies. It's a temporary fix, but I really like how Treyarch put an effort into this problem so early on. We will talk about this problem and the fixes Treyarch tries to go for throughout this entire video, as it's interesting to speculate what must have went into the thought process of the development team. Lastly, I want to stay on Verrückt just a little longer to talk about its atmosphere. See, Nacht Der Untoten is inside a bunker at night, which is definitely creepy, but also a little generic. Now you could argue the same for Verrückt, but personally I prefer Verrückt because an asylum can tell more of a story. When I play Nacht, I don't wonder where I am or what these zombies are doing here, but in Verrückt, I suddenly start to question whether these zombies were patients at this asylum, or even staff maybe. I can in good conscience say that Verrückt beats Nacht on every single aspect, and for that, I'll have to put Verrückt in good, even by today's standards. Let's take a step back for a moment and enjoy Shi No Numa together. See, while Verrückt pushed the bar when it comes to innovating new ways to experience zombies, Shi No Numa takes a simpler approach. In fact, this map introduces almost nothing new. I say almost, because Shi No Numa is the first map to have dog rounds. See, every 5 rounds dogs will spawn in, and after successfully killing them, you get a free max ammo. Dog rounds are extremely useful because it guarantees you that you will get your ammo back. This makes ammo way less of a concern and by extension makes the game a lot easier. I personally like dog rounds a lot, but I do see how some people prefer the added challenge of ammo concerns. Anyhow, aside from that, Shi No Numa is a very straightforward map. Even the layout is extremely simple. I will say though, that I am a sucker for jungle aesthetics, and so this map has a bit of a bias for me. When it comes to perks, Shi No Numa actually randomizes the location of them. I don't really understand why, because you wanna run around and get all the perks anyway, no matter where they stand. I can see how this adds a little bit of variation to a game, but it's honestly a bit of a weird choice to me. I think the map could be considered quite lackluster, but as I stated before, I'm quite biased towards an aesthetic like this. To add to that, I think the traps are a lot more unique. I especially like the flogger, and it's also a nice contrast after Verrückt to get a map that is so much easier. This map offers very open areas to train your zombies, and so all things considered, I'll put this map in average tier. Now, onto the big one. The giant one might say. I will say, I played the Black Ops 3 version of this map instead of Der Ries. I've heard there are some differences between the two maps, but it's mostly a similar experience. If there's an audience out there that wants me to experience the World of War maps in their initial form, then please let me know in the comments. For now though, I'm happy to say that innovation is back. The Giant introduces one of the most iconic zombie features ever, the Pack-a-Punch machine. Now, I have to talk about it for a moment. The Pack-a-Punch machine is not that innovative. Let's compare it to perks for a moment. See, at its core, perks enhance gameplay by giving new effects to the player. Faster movement speed, being able to revive yourself, carrying an extra gun, no explosive damage. These effects are interesting to play with. Now I do think perks have their own issues, which I'll go into later, but when it comes to Pack-a-Punch, all it really does is add extra damage to your gun. So then the question becomes, why is this thing so iconic? Well, the answer is flavor. See, while your gun's damage gets increased, you also get to shoot lasers now. Your gun gets a cool looking glow, and in some circumstances the gun changes altogether. As far as Call of Duty goes, that doesn't just happen. Well, nowadays it does, but definitely not back then. What this means is that you don't just want to Pack-a-Punch for extra damage. You want to see what kind of cool shit it's gonna do. To add to that, they made sure unlocking Pack-a-Punch is always very rewarding. And the early game of any zombies game usually revolves around getting there. At its core, Pack-a-Punch and Double Tap Root Beer are extremely similar, but we don't perceive them the same way at all. So how do you introduce a machine like this? Well, the Giant answers this question brilliantly. Right as you spawn, you can see the Pack-a-Punch machine from a small window behind a closed door. Given that the machine was new at the time, the reasonable first question upon seeing this must have been, what is that? To unlock the door, the player has to go to every corner of the map to link a machine with the Pack-a-Punch door. How do you know which machines to link? Well, they're giant teleporters, they're pretty hard to miss. This also adds into the problem I talked about earlier, where Treyarch needs to find ways for players to explore the entire map. Players are forced to go to every corner of the map if they want to unlock Pack-a-Punch. Again, just like the perks, rewarding the player with something great if they play the way Treyarch envisioned them to play. After linking 3 of the teleporters to the door, it will eventually open and you now have access to Pack-a-Punch. As an added bonus, you can now also teleport back to spawn from any of these corners. And yes, that means teleporters are also a new addition to the game. I don't think the Giant needed them really, but teleporters definitely become useful on bigger maps later on. With teleporters, perk machines, moving mystery boxes and Pack-a-Punch now all over the map, players actually have to spend the first 10 to 15 waves exploring the map before they are finally settled and ready to train. Compare this to Nacht Der Untoten, where all you needed was a single gun from the mystery box, and you can see how much improvement the zombie game mode has went through in just these 4 maps alone. And this leaves me with a verdict for the Giant. Now, I do believe Verrückt pushed boundaries more than the Giant did. To add, I also don't think the Giant is a very interesting location for a zombies map. An abandoned factory could be interesting, but we don't see much of that in the Giant. You're mostly walking around in the outside areas instead of in the factory itself, where all you really do is get to a teleporter before going outside again. I like that more how Verrückt handled this, where you can't go outside at all and are stuck in the asylum's tight corridors. We also get to see a lot more forms of abandoned facilities in later maps, which, I can't fault the Giant for since it was the first map to do it, but it does create a fatigue for later maps. This leaves me with putting the Giant in the average tier. And with that, World of War maps come to an end. I'm satisfied with the positions of these maps, but I would like to add that I think the Giant has the argument to be put in the good tier, together with Verrückt. I think my biased distaste towards facility type maps influenced my perspective on the map. However, I'm convinced that Verrückt is the better map. Throughout my journey I've become increasingly more curious about community perspective on all these maps, and I can't wait to see just how controversial or spot on my opinions will be in the scene after I'm done editing. Also, before we move on to Black Ops maps, you have officially reached the first denizen checkpoint. At the denizen checkpoint, I will tell you how many denizens there are in the World at War or other game maps. So, we just did World at War, which means you should now have one denizen. There are more denizens hidden in Black Ops 1 maps, so good luck finding them, and I'll see you at the next checkpoint. Alright, we have arrived at the one and only game I had previous experiences with. Black Ops 1. As I stated in the intro, I played Kino Der Toten and a bit of 5 when I was a young kid. Going into this game, I was worried that this would cause for nostalgic bias, but in the end, I don't think it did. Now, before going into Kino, we have to talk about a couple of things. Firstly, we have main playable characters now. In fact, we've had them since Shi No Numa, but I didn't mention them because I didn't deem it important yet. However, now that we're getting more and more maps with lore pieces, I think it's become substantially more important to talk about this. In broad terms, the story is about interdimensional warfare across time and space. There's no logical order in which you play these maps because there's constant time traveling going on. Without googling the story, it becomes extremely hard to understand everything. Therefore, I didn't care about taking the story into consideration when I played through these maps. There are some notable exceptions for maps where I believe the story actually is its center point. As an example I can give you, Moon. This map felt like it was built around its quest, and so that's what I deemed most important about it. Also, after playing through all the maps, I did thorough research into the entire lore to the point where I think I have a pretty good grasp on everything. Still though, for the purpose of this video, I won't be mentioning the story that much. What I will talk about though is the characters, because despite not caring too much about the story when I played through the games, I did care about the characters. All you need to know for now is that for the biggest chunk of these maps, you play as one of the 4 characters: Nikolai, Richtofen, Dempsey, and my personal favorite, Takio. These 4 characters are the hero of the story, if you will, and so you get to play as them most of the time. I really enjoy playing with this group, and I think all of them add value in one way or another. We will be playing as different groups of characters in other maps, but I think this one stands above all of them. I think it's very charming you get to play with these characters across multiple games and generations. It really solidifies them as the face of the Zombies game mode. Another thing I have to mention are wonder weapons. See, wonder weapons have been a thing since Nacht Der Untoten actually, however I didn't think they were important to mention yet either, as there were only 2 of them by the time you get to the Giant. Starting from Kino Der Toten though, wonder weapons will become way more important and will get their own identities attached to a certain map. They are often used in quests too, making it impossible to finish the quest without one. I think wonder weapons were a genius idea, makes the box way more fun to spin, and most of them are extremely fun to use in gameplay. The satisfaction of getting the wonder weapon from the box actually adds a lot to replayability more than most people will realize. There's a magic too, making the player have that feeling that they are extremely overpowered. It's something you can really only achieve in a PvE format, and I will talk about this feeling a lot more when we enter Buried later in this video. You don't get these types of weapons in campaign or multiplayer really either, and so these two become staples for the Zombies game mode. With all that said and done, I think it's finally time to head into Kino. Kino is quite the interesting one to talk about. See, Kino is one of the few maps we will see throughout this series that is in a very unique spot, namely being the first map of a new game. The first map is the most important maps for lots of reasons. But one that is most important is that it grants the opportunity for new players to get into the game mode. In the World of War maps, I vouch for maps to create new and unique ways for players to play the Zombies game mode. However, as the first map, I don't think you should try to be unique at all. Adding a gimmick to a starting map will really only confuse newer players in later maps, because it will likely stray away from the gimmick. To describe to you what I think the first map to any game should be like, it's to be solid and standard, as well as introduce a player to the mechanics of the game, in a smooth and easy to understand way. Given that we have Black Ops 2, 3, 4 and Cold War still left, we will get the opportunity to see Treyarch's perspective on what the first map should be like multiple times. None of this is to say you can't innovate. We have seen Treyarch is amazing at innovation. Every single thing added to the Zombies game mode thus far has become a feature ever since. Door crowns, perks, pack-a-punch, traps, wonder weapons, all of these newly added features became permanent additions to the game. It therefore disappoints me to say that Kino Der Toten doesn't really innovate at all. In Kino we get a new enemy type, a new wonder weapon and a new trap. The enemy Nova crawlers I think are quite interesting. See, they force you to aim downwards, which probably doesn't seem like a big deal, but in this game mode headshots are key. So because you have to aim downwards now, this can really screw your flow of DPS. After killing a Nova 6 crawler, it will explode and leave behind gas. Another great idea, to help the player change their pathing when it comes to training. Maybe Treyarch at some point realized that if they can't fully stop the player from training, the least they can do is make it a little bit more difficult. All in all, I really like this enemy. The Wonder Weapon 2 is great. This baby's got the Thunder Gun and it will one-shot anything in sight by the mere press of a button. This thing feels stupid overpowered, and I love using it. I don't think it feels as satisfying as the Wunderwaffe, but it definitely feels better. I don't think this was the type of innovation I was looking for though, going into a new game. I've read that this map was supposed to be a World of War map originally, but it got delayed due to time constraints. And when compared with other maps in Black Ops 1, I think this becomes obvious. I cannot in good conscience put this map in the good tier, when the standard for maps in this game is substantially higher. Ask yourself what Kino Der Toten will bring you that the Giant does not. See, at least the Giant brought us a new iconic new feature. This, despite the Giant being a map from an older game. I think the Giant and Kino quality-wise are very similar, but because Kino wasn't limited in the ways that the Giant was, I'll have to put Kino at the end of the average tier. You might be wondering what is holding me back from saying that this map is lackluster, given that I'm being very harsh on it. Well, I did say earlier that Kino has the test to be standard and solid, so despite this map doing nothing interesting, I do believe that it succeeds in being a great introduction for a new player. Especially those unfamiliar with World of War. I'm sure because Kino Der Toten brought in a lot of new players that people look back on this map with fond memories, and this leads me to believe that this placement is a controversial one, but I ask of you to put your nostalgia aside for a moment and really ask yourself what you believe it is that makes Kino great. Because in my playtime, I did not find an answer to this question, and I'll happily enter the discussion down in the comments below, but for now let's move on to the next map. This is the last map we will be seeing that I had prior experience with. I won't lie to you, as a kid I really hated this map. Therefore, I really wasn't excited to get into this one. But, to my pleasant surprise, this map is fantastic. I love the flavor of this map so much. Remember when I said that you don't always play as the 4 main characters? Yeah, in this map you play as John F. Kennedy. And that's not me being jokeful, no, you actually play as him. He's in this game fighting against the undead. Fidel Castro is here too, as well as Richard Nixon. And the last guy who I didn't recognize, I'm sorry. To add to that, this map takes place in the fucking Pentagon and you actually go deep inside of it. I really love getting to the bottom floor with all the alarm lights going off. There are a lot of teleporters scattered throughout this map that, for the first time, you actually don't need to link or anything. You just run in and you get teleported to a random location on the map. This brings some oriental chaos to the map, and I think that was quite fun. The reason why is because of what I consider the most fun enemy in the entire franchise. The Pentagon Thief. This fucker. This absolute bastard brings in so much chaos to this map, and I love every second of it. He spawns in every 5 or so rounds, and at first you might wonder what's going on. Lots of floating numbers come towards you, which you can actually shoot, but once they get too close, this little bastard reveals itself and steals your gun. Yeah, he yoinks that shit. Then he starts to run away with it, and you have to go chase him if you want it back. So you're running through a million teleporters trying to save your gun from this random ass dude. I thought it was a great idea to make this a special round so there are no zombies to interfere with the chase. Playing this Pentagon Thief round with friends is so much fun, as you can see how the man yoinks every one of your guns. There's also a hidden incentive to kill him early, as killing him before he grabs your gun rewards you with a cheap Pack-a-Punch bonus. Speaking of which, I think pulling the DEFCON switches was a great idea to get yourself the Pack-a-Punch. And then Pack-a-Punch's position itself was yet another great idea, because after Pack-a-Punching, the doors will open and you can use your newly upgraded gun to blast off all the zombies that are behind it. I can see why the Pentagon Thief might be annoying to some players, but at the very least I think it's safe to say that innovation was in full swing with this map, and it's unique in a lot of different ways. I think I quite enjoy the opportunities we get to play as characters that aren't the main four. It really makes them stand out amongst the other maps as more unique experiences that aren't linked to a greater story. For me, this map really worked, and I had a lovely experience playing it. Therefore, I'm putting this map in the great tier. This too, even by today's standards. Next up is Ascension, and I want you to understand that we are now entering DLC content, which means that you have to pay extra to get to play these maps. Now, I won't be concerning myself much with prices for maps, as I don't think the monetary value should be considered when looking at quality of each map. But let's talk about Zelda for a moment though. In Zelda, you have the legendary Triforce, and this Triforce has 3 parts: the part of power, wisdom, and courage. In Zombies, we have the legendary Triforce of solidity. We have the Giant, Kino, and now Ascension. 3 maps that, at least for me, perfectly encapsulate the survival style of zombie maps. Story quests have very little influence on these maps. There's no specific gimmick for them, and they offer open spaces for the player to easily train around. These 3 maps are the easiest to boot up if you want a no-nonsense, short zombie experience. This makes the 3 of them probably quite interchangeable when it comes to rating them. I've given my reasons earlier as to why I believe Kino isn't as strong as the Giant, and in that same vein, I think the Giant isn't as strong as Ascension. I think Ascension fully embraces its design. This map is for beginners and it knows it. There are many gigantic, enormous open areas to run around, and in the Black Ops 3 version, they even gave you access to the perk Widow's Wine right next to one of those spots. To give Ascension even more props, I also quite like the rocket. It's a cool little spectacle scene, which is nothing compared to later maps, but I like how we have stuff happening inside a map now. The monkey rounds are a little annoying, although I don't think I care too much about them. I kinda just thunder gun them away whenever they pop up. Overall, if you want the standard zombie survival experience, then I think Ascension is the way to go. And therefore, I'll be putting it inside the good tier. Call of the Dead is probably gonna be another controversial one. See, the main reason being that this map is a gimmick to it. Now, gimmicks are often controversial because it's one of those things that players either love or, some players hate. If that is the case for this map, then I am happily standing on the side of the Call of the Dead lovers. The gimmick of this map is George. Yes, we have another real life person making it into our zombie maps, and it only took us 2 maps. This guy has been turned into a zombie, which is interesting, I suppose, but the gimmick is that this fucker can't die. Well, technically he can, but it's really hard to do so. Shooting him makes him go into a frenzy and he will fuck you up, and I absolutely love this. The constant looming threat of George makes the map extremely fun to play. Usually in between rounds you have a few seconds to relax before the next round starts, but with George, there's always the looming threat of wondering where he is. Such a brilliant idea for a zombie gimmick, because when you really think about it, it is kinda strange that you're getting breathing air in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. It's also the first time Treyarch found a solution to keep the player engaged indefinitely, and although they will find better ways, it's still cool they figured it out in such a fun way. I like the idea of George being here too. The reason he is here is because the location where you're playing at was a film set that turned wrong due to the zombie apocalypse. George got turned while you tried to survive as the actors of the movie. It's a neat idea, but I do think this map doesn't really do much with it other than the characters. Like there's no stage light or film set pieces around the map. Speaking of which, I do like the layout of the map quite a lot. I don't have much knowledge about layout design, so I can't comment too much on why that is, but yeah, it feels nice to play this one. I think Call of the Dead is a good time to start talking about story quests too. This map felt like it had the first significant quest. or in its proper term, Easter egg. I'm not sure why these quests are called Easter eggs, as I always thought they were more like small hidden details developers left behind, but no, in this franchise the main quest of any map is called the main Easter egg. I tried to do all the Easter eggs, starting from Call of the Dead, for all the maps as I thought they were quite important, especially in later maps, to get a full grasp on a map's quality. Compared to some other eggs, I actually really like doing this one. It's all about helping the original crew escape as they are locked behind a door, and going around the map for it was quite neat. I will go into Easter eggs more deeply throughout this video, so for now I'll just leave it at that, as I don't think this one for Call of the Dead was that significant for my experience. One thing I will mention though, is that with the introduction of Easter eggs, we now have something extremely important in zombies. Purpose. See, before, everything you were building towards was to set a new record on the amount of rounds you could survive. While this is quite fun to improve at, it can become stale very quickly. The biggest motivator to do was just an internal purpose. You just wanted to get Kino to round 40. But with quests, the purpose becomes external. You're now not surviving for nothing, you're surviving because you have a quest to complete. This essentially makes the game a lot more like a roguelike game. Creating more reasons to boot up a specific map is essential when more and more maps get added. Call of the Dead managed to nail its Easter egg despite being one of the first ones to do so, while also managing to set itself apart with an incredibly fun gimmick. Without a doubt, this map deserves to be in the great tier. Also, little side note in case you want to do a little guessing game, there are 3 maps in total that will be making it into the near perfect tier. We'll get there eventually though. Let's move on. Shangri-La, or as I like to call it, Shangri-La, is another map with a big jungle aesthetic. Back when we talked about Shi No Numa, I said that this was my favorite kind of aesthetic, and so it caused for a bit of bias when I was rating that one. With Shangri-La though, that doesn't really seem to be the case. I'm not entirely sure what it is with this map, but it left me really disappointed. Firstly, I think the map layout didn't really click with me. There isn't really a spot on this map that didn't feel really claustrophobic, which caused me to have quite a rough experience with this map. Secondly, I really had the idea that this map was gonna be very Indiana Jones-like, with traps everywhere that could ruin your run. Now, while traps are definitely present, it feels very underutilized. This should have been the map with a rolling boulder towards a small path. Instead, we just get the small path. They could have really went in on making this map a brutal experience, but all we get is just really the shell of that. If I want to play a hard map with small passages, I'd rather boot up Verrückt. The wonder weapon was quite fun to use though. It's called the Baby Maker, which is my IRL nickname, so it did feel quite relatable. It's a very straightforward weapon. You shoot and zombies turn tiny, so you can kick them away. It's honestly one of the more unique wonder weapons we ever get, but something I've realized across all these maps is that a wonder weapon alone does not do enough for me to save a map. To give it some more props though, I thought the Easter egg did utilize the map quite well, and I really liked the day and night vibe it had going on. I saw online that people think this map takes place on Mars, but because of some of the Easter egg parts, to those people I say, what the fuck. I'm not entirely sure what it was in the end though. This map had the potential to be great, yet when everything is said and done, I have to honestly put this map at the bottom of the average tier. The very last map of Black Ops 1 is Moon. Now, story-wise, Moon is quite likely one of the most important maps we have to discuss. The Easter egg in this map sets everything that happens in Black Ops 2 in motion. From what I understand, Richtofen, for reasons I won't get into, eventually gets control of the zombies and turns out to be quite an evil man. To stop Richtofen, the rest of the crew decides to blow up Earth. This way, Richtofen won't hold all the power down there. Yes, the ending of this Easter egg has you literally blowing up planet Earth. And yes, we will be playing on a blown up version of planet Earth for almost all of the Black Ops 2 maps. So yeah, Moon is quite an important event. What's interesting about Moon though is that the Easter egg is god awful to complete. I'm not sure if I did it wrong, but I had to spin the box so many times to be able to progress. I really didn't like that. RNG shouldn't be halting me from progressing further. To speak a bit more about Moon, I thought using the suit was a little annoying, and while the low gravity areas are a fun idea, I also didn't like playing with that too much. I felt like Moon was quite a clunky experience. I'll have to say though that I can't deny how cool of an idea it all was. Despite it not working for me, I can respect Treyarch for going all out with the finale of this game. This map is definitely an ambitious one, and I appreciate that, more than my own biases. I think this map becomes more fun to play the more you care about the story of the franchise, I do, however, have the feeling again that the map could have used a better layout. A lot of the rooms in this map feel quite tiny with barely anything in them. They just contain doors for the sake of halting the player's progression, which this was probably placed to stop the player from doing the Easter egg early into a game. It's quite fun when a player is in a higher round when the Easter eggs come to a close, because having a lot of zombies around ups the stakes and the difficulty. However, putting a million doors in the way or involving RNG into the process really isn't the ideal way to do this. Just like Shangri-La, I feel like this map had more potential than how it turned out. I do think that Moon delivered a better product in the end though. And as a finale, I think it did great. Taking all this into consideration, I'll put Moon in the good tier. I imagine the story nerds will likely put it a lot higher, but I'd love to discuss Moon further in the comments below. Congrats in making it to the Denizen checkpoint of Black Ops 1. Real quick, by now you should have 3 denizens. Let's move on to Black Ops 2. And so, we have entered Black Ops 2. In this game, we will be playing in a post-moon planet Earth, where everything has been blown up and gone to shit. We will also be seeing Richtofen controlling the zombies, which can be noticed by looking at the eyes of the zombies. When the eyes are blue, it means Richtofen is in power. Also, whenever you pick up a power-up, we will now be hearing Richtofen, which I think is a pretty cool nod. Because Richtofen is a bad guy now though, we cannot be playing as him, which means we get to play as a new crew. This crew starts out irrelevant, as survivors of the New King, but they end up becoming quite important themselves. This crew exists of Samuel, Abigail, Malton and Russman. I'm gonna be honest, I don't particularly care about this crew. They are fine. Just like with Black Ops 1, a new game comes with new opportunity. And the first map is very important to show what a new game is capable of. While trying to get as many new players in as you can. In Black Ops 1, we saw this in the form of Kino Der Toten, where Treyarch decided to put a halt to innovation, for just a moment, to create a map that is very basic, but very well built. The first map in Black Ops 2 is Tranzit, which is a completely different take on what a first map should be like. Putting the map's quality aside for just a moment, I can appreciate Treyarch for trying a new approach when it comes to a launch map. Kino Der Toten must have been a massive success, so it would have been a very easy target to just create another basic map. Tranzit though is anything but basic, and it's cool to see them go for a new map that's more over the top. With that being said, I think it's time to take a look at Tranzit. It's hard to begin with this map. This launch map actually has a gimmick to it. In fact, we haven't seen this big of a gimmick ever, aside from maybe Call of the Dead's George. See, this map isn't just one map. No, this map consists of 5 smaller maps that are connected to one another via a bus. You enter the bus, and the bus driver will drive you to these 5 spots. Technically you could walk, but that requires you to run through a fog filled with denizens, the new enemy type. By the way, these denizens don't count for the denizen Easter egg in this video. Tranzit will not contain any hidden denizens. Denizens are small shitters that jump on top of your face before they start to scratch and kill you. The bus though is able to safely travel through the fog. There's also a boss type enemy on this map called the Avocado. I didn't really care too much about this guy, I just knifed him a couple of times and he would leave for a few rounds. Each of these 5 areas has something of value within them, and you're gonna need to travel through them all if you want to unlock Pack-a-Punch. We're also gonna need another thing for Pack-a-Punch. A turbine. See, in Black Ops 2, we can now craft things at crafting tables. This will get used for all sorts of things, even wonder weapons. In Tranzit, the main equipment to craft is the turbine. This machine can give power to anything you face it towards, for just a brief moment. Even when you haven't fully turned the power on. We're gonna need this thing for Pack-a-Punch. To be honest, the process of unlocking Pack-a-Punch on Tranzit is quite tedious. I'm not a fan of it at all. Throughout my journey in all of Black Ops 2, I didn't use the crafting tables all that much. Lastly, another new mechanic is the banking system. Tranzit has a bank, in which you can deposit your points. You can then go back in another Tranzit run to withdraw them, essentially giving you a big boost in cash on an earlier wave. This mechanic I actually do really like. It's cool that I can make subsequent playthroughs of a map easier for myself, after I've shown I'm good enough to be able to store overflowing cash I had. It's also highly optional, so even if you're not a fan of the system, you can just ignore it. With all these new mechanics, you can definitely see that we're now moving forward from Black Ops 1 right from the start. To me, this is awesome to see. I will say that I don't think Tranzit's gimmick hits the mark for me just like Call of the Dead did. The bus is quite fun to use as you're always on a timer in a specific area before the bus will leave you. This way you're always engaged when playing through Transit. And even if you miss the bus, it is very much possible to deal with the denizens and travel through the fog yourself. Which leads me to another point that I like. See, Transit isn't just those 5 areas alone. There are actually quite a few hidden secrets inside the fog. One of which is quite important for the Easter egg. Also, the bunker from Nacht Der Untoten makes it into Transit as one of the secret areas, which I thought was a quite cool secret to find. I love finding stuff like this, and I can imagine Transit must have been such a mystery when it was first released. This all leads me to my verdict on the map. Clearly, there are some things I think Transit did right, but I also believe the bus can be quite a tedious experience, because if you miss it once, it can destroy the flow of the map instantly, as you're either stuck in a small spot on the map, or you have to catch up by going through the fog. There are actually teleporters on the map, however they are completely randomized, so there's no way of knowing if it will help you or ruin the flow even more. Despite this though, Transit offers a very unique zombies experience, which causes me to say that I'd rather go back to Transit than play Kino Der Toten again. Transit isn't interchangeable, it isn't similar to another map either, and I respect Treyarch for launching a game with such a bold map. Which, with lots of new mechanics and lots to like and dislike about this map, I'll be putting this map in a good tier, as I believe Transit showed ambition and progress towards making the zombies game mode as good as it can be. Transit felt like a risk, and to me, it at least somewhat paid off. Next up, I want to talk about 3 maps real quick. None of these maps I wrote a script for. I don't think it's very important, so I'm sorry if there's a lot of us at this part, but I'm gonna be real quick with these. We're gonna talk about Farm, Bus Depot, and Town. Now, these 3 parts are like one of the spots in Transit. So Transit has 5 spots. 3 of those spots got made into a separate map. Now, I'm gonna put them in order, but I consider all 3 of these bad. These are just, remade maps. They weren't made from the ground up. It's an environment we already know. Nothing has been done with this. It's just, it's bad. Not necessarily because the quality of the map is bad, because the effort. There was no effort in this. And I think these maps just got made to sort of get more familiar with the normal zombie style, given that Transit is drastically different from anything else zombies is. So they probably put these maps in just to give like a general idea of what zombies usually is like, which I think is a good idea, sure, but I mean, compared to other maps, I don't think these maps should be in any consideration. I will put them in order though. I think Town is the best one, just because it has everything. There's perks, there's Pack-a-Punch, there's a mystery box that moves. It's, it's standard, and like all the other ones, this one is also very small. They're all small, which I also don't think fits in Black Ops 2 anymore. Maybe if Town was a Black Ops, or maybe even a World at War map, it would be good, but we're in Black Ops 2 now. This is, it's bad, but it's at least the best one out of the 3. Then the second best, I think, should be Bus Depot. Technically, Bus Depot is the worst map, but Bus Depot doesn't have anything. There's no perks or anything. The only thing that's here is a mystery box. So you could kind of argue it's a little bit unique in the sense that it has absolutely nothing. Like there's nothing to this map, which is something that, even Nacht Der Untoten had like doors and shit. This map has nothing. So you could argue it's worse than Nacht, but at the same time, that's kind of a point that makes it a little bit more unique. So I'm gonna put it above Farm, and I think Farm is the worst one, just because Farm is a worse version of Town, and I hate the layout of Farm. I don't think these maps should be considered in any way, shape, or form. They're just, it's just survival. That's all there is to it. I don't know what more to tell you. Let's just move on from these. Proceeding on to yet another map that I think isn't good at all. Nuketown Zombies. This map disappointed me a lot. Firstly, just like the previous 3, this map has already been used before, and so automatically it becomes a little bit of a less interesting playground to play on. Luckily, Nuketown Zombies at least gives the map a new makeover. Also, I will say that I like the little nod it has going on story-wise. Apparently, you play on Nuketown at the exact same time as Moon is happening. So, by the time you get to a specific zombie wave, which is wave 25, the colors of the eyes will shift to blue, indicating that it was at that moment Richtofen got control of the zombies. This goes even further, where if you die, you'll see one of the nukes fall down on the town. I like that idea. But that's about where all the good things for this map end. This map has a weird gimmick, where only after a couple rounds will a perk or pack-a-punch fall down from the sky. I will say, I actually like this idea, but I cannot understand why they randomized this order. See, it would be so cool if you guaranteed had to survive to, let's say, round 20 before Juggernaut would fall from the sky to help you out. Everyone knows some perks are stronger than others, so why not drop them in that order? It would have at least made Nuketown more interesting as a difficult map instead of just praying to RNG that Juggernaut will fall first. I'm really curious why this map ended up so lackluster. This map wasn't free either, you had to pay to play on this map. We didn't even get access to the bunker. It's such a tiny space for a zombie map, 3 games in. And I hate to talk badly about this map so much, but to be quite honest, this map was the worst for me, aside from the 3 maps we talked about earlier. And so, I'll be putting it at the end of the lackluster tier, the bottom of this tier list. Next up is Die Rise. This map is quite the interesting one. You can tell Treyarch decided to experiment some more after Tranzit, as this map is very focused on verticality. This is something that we had never seen before, and sadly, we will never see again. I say this map is interesting, because I personally really like it, but at the same time see that this map is quite bad. Let's start with the obvious biggest flaw of this map. Why do I only get to use the elevator key one time? See, this map gets you up and down heights by either jumping down or moving up with an elevator. This is cool in principle, but you can't actually call the elevators. You have to wait until they decide to go up to you. This is so odd, given that we had elevators already working just fine back in 5. To remedy this, there are keys that you can pick up. They make you able to call an elevator. Once. After that the key will break, and I cannot understand why. Secondly, I think the layout of this map is quite confusing, especially at the start where there are so many doors that all lead to the same thing. Sometimes you don't even have to buy a door at all, because you can just walk around it. There are a lot of small passages that all look extremely similar to one another. So then why do I say I like this map? Well, firstly, I think it looks cool. Secondly, the wonder weapon is extremely fun to use, and it feels very strong. I also thought the open areas were really pleasant to look at, especially the rooftop. To me, that's all I really need to enjoy the map. I understand though that for most this map's flaws will far outweigh its benefits. And I guess that's recognizable in the fact we never got something similar again. For the sake of this list's integrity, I'll accept those flaws and put my biases aside. This means that this map too probably deserves a spot in the lackluster tier. Black Ops 2 didn't really have a strong start, did it? I put 3 maps in bad, 2 maps in lackluster, and 1 map with an extreme gimmick in good. A lot of the maps we've seen in Black Ops 1 really have been experimenting a lot. We saw Call of the Dead try ahead at an Easter egg and the George endless chase. We saw Moon really pushing the idea of an Easter egg and making it a big part of its identity. We've seen lots of different ideas for engaging the player come by already. A lot of these work, but there are also a lot of failures, like how Tranzit or Die Rise didn't fully achieve what they were going for. Experimentation certainly means risk, but despite what you may think, experimentation is actually quite easy. What's harder though, is learning from your risk, and truly understanding not only what works, but why it works. Sometimes that means getting a fresh look, or a different perspective on what it means to make a zombies map. Cue Jason Blundell, who had been with Call of Duty for a very long time up until this point. After seeing what the zombie game mode had gone through in the last 3 games, he decided to give the zombies the new perspective they were looking for, and reap the benefits of all that experimentation. He decided to create Mob of the Dead. Mob of the Dead changed zombies forever. The elements Mob adds are elements we will see all the way to Forsaken in Black Ops Cold War. This map changed what it means to have a fully fledged zombies map. After Mob, maps like Kino or The Giant are a thing of the past. So, how did Blundell do this? Well, firstly, let's set the stage for Mob of the Dead. This map takes place on Alcatraz Island. Its cast of characters consists of 4 convicts who all got given the death penalty, the electric chair. At some point, these bozos ended up in purgatory. They're stuck in an endless loop of trying to escape Alcatraz Island while fighting off an undead horde. Personally, I think this setting is the best setting we ever get in the entire franchise. Alcatraz Island is just so perfect for a zombie setting, as both the location and the idea of a zombie apocalypse are equally terrifying. It makes for an amazing fusion. The thugs add to this too by not being scared of it at all. They are very sassy about the entire ordeal, which makes them incredibly fun to play. We will only see this crew once, but I ended up liking them very much. At some point, one of the mobsters realized he was in purgatory and started writing notes for himself for the next cycle. The Easter egg revolves around trying to end the cycle, and this character named the Weasel becomes very important for it. So, the setting was a great idea, but we've seen great ideas before, with a poor execution. Heck, Der Reis was a great idea and that didn't work. Clearly Blundell must have noticed that the idea by itself isn't good enough. You have to find a way to make the player interact with it. We can see this in Call of the Dead, or even Ascension. Both of these maps have Easter eggs, yet as an average player you'll never really care for them. They are so incredibly hidden that you'd never figure out how to even begin with them. The same goes for the Wonder Weapon really. Think back to Tranzit or Der Reis. No average player could hope to figure out what to do with the parts or where they were all hidden without googling it. Again, all of these were experiments, but they weren't well executed. Blundell found a way to make it work. If escaping Alcatraz is the setting of the map, then you better do it if you want to unlock Pack-a-Punch. Now, most average players won't care about Easter eggs, but every damn player cares about Pack-a-Punch. To mix these two together was borderline genius. Combine that with the incredibly easy to understand steps and suddenly you have every player interacting with your map. Every player is uncovering the secrets of the Purgatory loop and trying to get their ass off the island. Combine that with the spectacular scene of riding the plane and crashing into the bridge, and what you just created can only be described as an experience. When I say Mob of the Dead changed zombies, I really mean it. No longer do conversations exist of, hey, I hit round 40 on Kino, or hey, I did round 20 on Ascension. Now it's, did you see the crash into the gate bridge? Dude, how do I get the third plane part? I stated this before in Call of the Dead, but giving the player more reasons to boot up your map other than survival is essential if you don't want your game mode to become stale. Every map going forward will have an identity that is linked not just to difficulty, but to the story it had to tell in its setting. Speaking about the Wonder Weapon, we are also reaping some more benefits in that front. Remember how in Transit it was basically impossible to find jet gun parts if you don't know where to look? How about you put the parts in the most obvious locations ever and make them glow? Or better yet, how about you create giant wolf heads? Surely any player will be able to find those. Mob of the Dead capitalizes on mistakes from the past in every front. We even see some of that classic zombies charm make it into the map. Look no further than Electric Cherry, the new perk that is very cleverly named. This new Mob of the Dead style of gameplay I'll be calling the collection type gameplay in future maps. As mob has you going all around the map to collect bits and pieces to not only make you stronger, but to progress the Easter egg. This collection type gameplay will be the almost exclusive way to play going forward. This does bring me to one flaw with mob though. See, mob tried extremely hard to bring this new collection type way of playing into the zombies game mode, and it definitely succeeded. But in doing so, it forgot its older brother a bit, the survival type of gameplay. To me it felt like mob offered almost no space to train around or to just relax in a comfortable spot. I was hoping the Golden Gate Bridge would reward me with the most comfortable spot on the map to train after doing all the hard work to get there. But instead they will just spawn a lot of boss zombies so you're forced to leave again. While I have to admit that Blundell's vision of collecting items all over the map is superior to just survivaling, it does leave a bit of a bad taste in my mouth that the relaxing idea of just booting up a zombies map and shooting some zombies until you die is gonna be a thing of the past. Regardless though, it goes without saying that Mob of the Dead is the first map that makes it into the near perfect tier. I realize Mob was quite a long story and I wish I could say we get a bit of a palate cleanser here, but Buried is another interesting map to talk about. Buried is the last survival type map we ever get. After Buried, Blundell's collection type map will have completely taken over the game mode. However, this isn't what I want to discuss. Earlier in the video, I stated that by the time we get to Buried, we have to talk about perks. Because perks have one major flaw that I cannot understand. For some reason, perks are limited to 4. You're only allowed 4 perks on any given map, except in some circumstances where you're allowed to sort of cheat yourself into getting more of them. The limit on perks is something I've never really understood. The glory of the zombies game mode is the fact that you're an overpowered character with a gun in a world with an infinite amount of zombies. It's satisfying when hundreds of them die in front of you. Perks are meant to make this process easier, yet for some reason, there is a limit on how easy it's allowed to get. This limit stops you from becoming the most overpowered version of yourself. I can only guess that the limit on perks is there to stop players from discovering the correct path of buying all the perks, and instead allow the player to try a different combination of 4 perks in any different match. Except, this doesn't really work, because people will buy the most overpowered perks anyway. You can't really play without Juggernaut, so now you only have 3 slots remaining. Those 3 slots often are filled by Double Tap, Speed Cola or Stamina Up. This leads me to Buried. See, last time we talked about perks, we had Juggernaut, Quick Revive, Speed Cola and Double Tap. However, since then they've added PhD Flopper, Stamina Up, Deadshot, Mule Kick, Tombstone, Who's Who, Electric Cherry and now have Buried, Vulture 8. Clearly your options have broadened, which is why it's such a shame Treyarch doesn't allow us to get all of these in a single game. Buried, however, changed this a bit, by making it extremely simple to get all the perks. You just kill the witch in the witch house, and you get a free random perk that isn't limited by the 4 perk slots. This does make Buried quite an easy map, as having all the perks naturally is very strong. But it just begs the question, why only on Buried? Clearly it can work without an issue, so why can't I have this on any other map? It's honestly a real shame to be limited in a game mode that's all about being overpowered. At some point though, Treyarch will realize this, and change will happen. But speaking further on Buried itself for a moment, at first I didn't really enjoy the map, as though Leroy was incredibly confusing to maneuver. Apparently you have to give him boost, but then he charges in the opposite direction, which I didn't really understand at first. Also, I thought the map was a bit confusing and there were so many walls for Leroy to charge through. Eventually though, I got the hang of it, and I actually ended up really liking Buried. I think the starting area is quite fun already, where you can get the L set if you survive long enough up there. It's a very pretty and unique map setting, I thought. I spoke a bit earlier about a perk named Vulture 8. This is the only map on which that perk ever exists. We only get to ever see it back in spirit in the form of Depth Perception in Black Ops Cold War. I think this is quite a shame, because this perk is so strong. Vulture 8 does a lot of things actually, but I think most importantly it leaves a green smoke behind. And if you stand at it, zombies won't aggro you. This means that you can freely reload any gun, which not only helps tremendously for the L set you probably got at the start, but also this map's wonder weapon. I really like seeing how a newly introduced perk has such a nice effect on the weapons most players will play with. This map was really fun to play, and I'm thankful it brought the idea forward of giving more perks to the player. Honestly, I'll have to put this map in a grey tier as well. Alright, we reached another game's finale. For Black Ops 2, we actually get to play as the original cast of characters for the first time in this game. Last time we played the finale, it was on Moon in Black Ops 1. I thought Moon was a poor map, but it had a great send-off point with the exploding of the Earth. There was a spectacle to it, one that you come to expect from the finale of a game. Origins is much the same. This map looks fantastic. You're running through the trenches of World War I with 3 gigantic robots walking all over the place. This map was created by Blundell, which means the collection type gameplay is back. Coming from the success of Mob of the Dead, it was clear that this type of gameplay was here to stay. So now the question became, how far could you push it? Origins pushes it very far. Far beyond what is in my opinion comfortable. You need a degree in rocket science and the adventurous spirit of Indiana Jones to play this map. There are so many things hidden in this map. Let's say you want to create a wonder weapon on this map. For the ice staff, I would need to pick up a shovel from spawn. I would then need to wait till it's winter before I can go and look for parts. Once I have found 3 parts, I now need to find a disc and a gramophone somewhere on the map. Now I need to open a portal to get a crystal. Once I have all 6 of those parts, I can finally build the ice staff. But wait, there's more. I now need to solve an ice staff puzzle multiple times. Then I need to shoot random gravestones scattered across the map. Finally I have to go to the center of the map to line up 4 gems. Then I have to go back through the portal, kill a bunch of zombies and charge up my ice staff. Only after all this is done, will I finally have the upgraded ice staff. But even that's not everything. Because there are 4 of these staffs, and they all have different methods to unlock and upgrade them. And even after doing all that, I would still only be on step 2 out of the 8 steps required to complete the Easter egg. Coming from someone who is quite casual when it comes to these games, I think this is way too much to ask of a player. Only a very, very select few players will memorize all these steps, and having to Google something over and over again takes away from how casual you can play these maps. This map walked into the same issue I had with Mob as well, where I don't think it offers nice spots to comfortably train or play more relaxed. Both these maps sort of push you into doing its steps and interact with it. I praise Mob for this, because it has very simple steps that any casual player can memorize. Even its setting doesn't require you to learn deep lore about the games. While Origins pushes the narrative even further. This makes it all the more confusing as you don't really understand why you're doing all these steps to begin with. Origins feels a lot more hardcore, which pushes me away from playing it more often. Looking back on the map though, now that I am a real hardcore gamer, I do think that Origins is a great finale. A hardcore map with great spectacle and lots of story relevance is exactly what a finale needs to be. It's not necessarily bad that some maps just aren't really catered to casual players. Hardcore players equally deserve a map they can really put their teeth into, and Origins feels exactly that. That being said, I like the volume of items to collect more in Mob of the Dead, when it wasn't this many items. So while I won't be putting Origins in the near perfect tier, I will give it a spot amongst the top of the great tier. And so here we are. Over an hour later you made it to the last denizen checkpoint. You should have 6 out of the 12 denizens by now. I'll be putting the other denizens in my next video where I will discuss Black Ops 3, 4 and Cold War. You may be wondering where Vanguard is in all of this, and I might talk about that game some other time, as I hadn't bought it yet when I started editing. For now though, I hope we can further discuss these maps in the comments below, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to watch this video.